All right, well here we go. It is clinical practice time for my Teach Now program. So I just want to start out by saying thank you for being my master teacher, my mentor teacher for this part of the clinical learning standards that we'll be covering. We're going to recognize major literary forms and their elements. We're going to recognize the characteristics of major chronological era as it pertains to the modern objectives that I'll be using. Students will be able to interview George Orwell by researching the questions to the answers to the questions. Why did you write 1984? And why do you believe your novel became so iconic? Students will be able to articulate 3 key characteristics of modern British literature and compare and contrast them with a summary of 1984. Students will be able to identify the major elements of dystopian fiction by analyzing the first 3 chapters and writing a summary. Students will prepare a 2-page oral report that answers the prompt or completes the prompt, "When Governments Speak." I thought I would give them something actually really broad that, based on what they get out of the novel 1984, they can kind of go in maybe different directions. And I thought here in Cambodia, with some of the political upheaval that is currently happening here, and some of them have really close connections with that, I thought it might be really interesting to hear their views on something like when governments speak. You know, when governments speak, what we should be listening, we shouldn't be, we should be critical. Maybe it would be a little bit like an opportunity for them to create almost like if they were going to do a TED Ed talk and really talk about, you know, government and how 1984 addresses some of those critical guidance and structure to foster a good educational environment. So these are some of the class rules that I've come up with, and they've seemed to work pretty well. Respect for each other and property. I always challenge them with questions like, how will you know at the end of each class that you had respect for each other? Class procedures that I have that most of the students have been really good with, but I do often need to remind them, is entering the classroom before the bell. I have these in place. I have them enter class quietly with all technology shaded. So instead of coming in on their phones or on their computer checking emails, I ask them to please do that in their off time in the hallways. When you come in, just be totally prepared for our class. Come in, and I have them put their technology like in the corner of their table. Take a seat at your desk and get out your learning resources. So of course they need to have whatever textbook we're into. Something, of course, usually they have like a journal for my classes, so they'll have that out. And yeah, and then as soon as the bell rings, I usually have like a do now or a bell work activity that they can just engage right away, and I usually don't need to even say anything. They just see it, it's up on the board, and so they do that right away. And in class equals on task, so my procedures and rules are no answering text, tweets, Snapchats, anything like that in classroom, unless we're actually doing something like that for an activity, which sometimes happens. Maintain a 15-centimeter voice while engaged in group work. Any drama too intense to stay focused on work is cause to a pass to see our wonderful principal, which happens. The rubric, I know it's important that we look over the rubric that you'll be using to assess my teaching, which makes me really nervous because I know that I struggle to meet even basic on most of these, but that's the point, right? Moving ahead and getting better. So standard 1 is just an overall basic idea of like, do I understand student development? And rubric standard is similar, but it's do I understand learning differences? So of course, differentiation becomes key. And standard 3, learning environments. So definitely, how am I managing a learning environment? How does the candidate create environments that support individual and collaborative learning? Is assessment. So how does the candidate use assessments, methods to engage students in their own growth? And so one of my goals actually, it's in going through this program, I really want to become so much better at formative assessment. I've really come to recognize how important formative assessment is. Strategies. How does the candidate use multiple instructional strategies to help students develop a deep understanding of the profession? Yeah. So those are the 10 standards, and this is the rubric obviously that you'll be using. And I think you got some emails, but like you'll actually I guess upload, yes, and you'll have access to to where you do that. So All right. I think make sure I covered everything. Yeah, I think that's about it. So there we go.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to the unit and observing you.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay.